Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply emotional and honestly, universally relatable narrative based on Khushwant Singh's classic story. We're going to map out the evolving, beautiful, and sometimes pretty heart-wrenching bond between a grandson and his grandmother. We'll trace how relationships inevitably change over time, how tradition completely collides with modernity, and how love often communicates best in total silence.
So, I want you to take a second right now and picture your own grandparents. Just hold that image in your mind. Got it? Well, our main character today is a grandmother who, to her grandson at least, seemed absolutely as old as time itself. She was someone so deeply entrenched in her ways that it was literally impossible to imagine her ever being young. She's described as short, slightly bent, with a face just mapped by peaceful wrinkles. Always dressed in spotless white, her lips were constantly moving in silent prayer while her fingers worked a rosary. It's just this incredibly powerful image of deep faith and discipline.
Section 1. A Portrait of Faith. We're starting off in the village, right in the earliest phase of their lives together, a time really characterized by a deep, almost inseparable physical closeness.
Okay, let's dive into this routine. It wasn't just a list of boring chores, it was the everyday rhythm of their shared life. She woke him up, got him dressed, fed him breakfast, and literally walked him to his village school every single day. There is just an incredible intimacy in this kind of repetitive, daily care, you know? It's that hands-on bonding that truly forms the bedrock of childhood security.
And this part right here brilliantly illustrates how intertwined their lives really were. She didn't just drop him off at the school gates and bolt. Because the village school was attached to the local temple, she would actually sit inside reading scriptures while he was right next door learning the alphabet. They were physically side by side, totally united by the shared environment of education and deep spirituality. Her constant companion, her unwavering faith and traditional values, was right there, anchoring both of their lives.
But hey, life rarely stays static. Section 2. The City Divide. Moving to the city introduces the absolute first major crack in their relationship, throwing them into a completely different environment.
Let's contrast these two setups directly. On one side, you have the village school, rooted in religion, moral values, and absolute closeness. On the other, the city school, totally focused on English, science, and music. The grandmother couldn't help him with his English lessons anymore, and there was zero religious teaching, which deeply distressed her. Even worse, she actively disliked that he was learning music. In her traditional worldview, music just wasn't meant for respectable people. This profound difference in values actively, and quite sadly, pushed them apart.
It is a tragic irony, and honestly something we see play out all too often today. They were living in the same house, breathing the exact same air in this modern city home, yet their emotional connection was dropping fast. Physical proximity does not guarantee emotional closeness when your worlds just don't overlap anymore.
Section 3. Growing Apart. As we track our narrator's coming of age, we also have to step back and look at the increasing, quiet isolation of the grandmother.
Let's trace how this happened, because their separation happened in distinct stages. Step 1, the big move to the city, which we just talked about. Step 2, he goes to university and is finally given his own room. So now that shared physical space is gone, and the last little thread of their daily interaction snaps. And finally, step 3, he leaves for 5 whole years of higher studies. Growing up, for the narrator, literally meant moving away, first room by room and eventually country by country.
But how did she handle this? Well, as the grandson pulled away into his rigorous studies and his fast-paced modern life, the grandmother didn't complain, not once. Instead, she anchored her love and all that abundance of time to 2 simple things: her rosary and the local birds. She accepted her seclusion with absolute grace, spinning her wheel, reciting her prayers, and finding this quiet, beautiful joy in feeding breadcrumbs to the sparrows every single afternoon.
5 long years. When he went abroad for that time, they went to the railway station to say goodbye. Now, you might expect a super tearful, highly emotional farewell, right? But no. She showed zero emotion. No crying, no grand speeches. She just held him, her lips moving in silent prayer, her fingers still completely focused on telling the beads of her rosary. It was a stoic, deeply internalized farewell from a woman who just fully accepted the passage of time.
Section 4, Return and Farewell. Let's bring the energy back up slightly because we're looking at his return before we transition into the quiet finality of her life.
Against all odds, she was right there at the station to meet him 5 years later, looking exactly the same. But that evening, something incredible happened.
For the absolute first time, she didn't pray. Instead, she gathered the neighborhood women, grabbed an old drum, and just sang for hours to celebrate the homecoming of warriors. Her stoic, unchanging nature suddenly culminated in this rare, loud, and incredibly joyous celebration of his return. A real game changer.
But that massive burst of energy took its toll. The very next day, she fell ill. And her final moments are just profound in their peacefulness. She immediately realized her end was near. Actually, instead of panicking or gathering the family for some dramatic last words, she just stopped communicating entirely. She felt she had wasted precious time not praying the previous evening. So she simply lay in bed, telling her beads. And there, quietly, the rosary slipped from her lifeless fingers as she deliberately and peacefully surrendered to death.
Section 5. The Sparrow's Tribute. This brings us to the explainer's deeply moving and, frankly, most visually striking conclusion. As her body lay on the floor, covered in a red shroud, hundreds of sparrows flew in and scattered themselves around her. Hundreds. But what's really interesting about this slide is there was no chirping. Complete silence. The family, naturally feeling sorry for the birds, tossed breadcrumbs to them, exactly the way the grandmother used to. But the sparrows absolutely refused to eat. They took no notice of the food whatsoever. They offered a silent vigil, and the moment her body was carried away for the funeral, they quietly flew off. They hadn't come for food at all. They had come to mourn.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out a bit and look at the core themes we've explored today. We've seen the beautiful evolution of familial love and bonding. We've watched the inevitable, sometimes painful change over time as distance grows. We've felt that stark contrast between tradition and modern education. But ultimately, we've witnessed the raw power of spirituality, simplicity, and the incredibly peaceful acceptance of life's final chapter.
I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought. How do the quietest moments in our lives actually speak the loudest? Think about it. The grandmother's silent prayers, her wordless farewell at the train station, and that breathtaking silence of the morning sparrows. It's a powerful reminder that our deepest bonds and our most profound family farewells don't always require words. Thank you so much for walking through this explainer with me. Take a moment today to think about the unspoken connections in your own life.